Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. I'm really excited about this. Andrew Seeley was asking whether I wanted to start with any comments about why we're doing this or why Shakespeare or what the goal of this particular discussion is. And I'm in a unique position here that I come in not at all feeling like an authority and feeling much more like a novice who's eager to learn what it is I'm missing by not already having a love for and mastery of Shakespeare, because I have enough trust in the authorities who have told me that Shakespeare is one of the gods of literature that I ought to have Shakespeare within my repertoire, but I don't feel like I really do. And I'll just describe quickly some of my personal experiences with Shakespeare and then the questions that I have about what I'm hoping to get out of the experience or expectations I have of what might come from these sessions. So I took a Shakespeare course in college at Penn State University, and it was the approach was a postmodern feminist approach to Shakespeare. So all we did is read Shakespeare with an effort to find those themes. And my most vivid memory was of coming to the end of a line, and the last two words were something like, what these values be. It wasn't the values. Values wasn't the word, but it was something that related to
Ought be.
What's it? What was it?
Ought be.
It could be. So I remember having a lengthy conversation in class about how Shakespeare was, at the conclusion of this line, juxtaposing two branches of philosophy, ontology and ethics. And I just thought, my brain does not, I can't think in the way this professor is asking me to, and I don't think I should be able to. And my thought at the time was, no, B rhymes with the line that came before. So that's why he ended on a particular word. And in that class, I did exceptionally well. The professor actually held my answers as models for the class to show for future students, but all I had done is take in and regurgitate what he had said over the course of the class. There was no real meaningful understanding on my part, but I was able to follow all the claims that he made and recite them back on tests. So, and I'm not sure how I feel about this in retrospect, but when it came time to write evaluations for the course, I told the professor that that's what I had done, that I really didn't understand it myself, and that I had only been repeating back what he had said throughout the course. So I've always wondered how he took that, but I'll never know. So that was one experience. I'm ashamed to admit this, but I did think I knew the basic plot of King Lear, and I thought it was one I would love. And I tried to teach it to my students on the fly one year. I just thought, we'll read it together. We'll go through the experience together. We'll discover it together. And I didn't succeed. I didn't succeed in getting from it what I should have. So I'm very excited to see. Now, one of the things that interests me is that Andrew had recommended reading the Charles Lamb version in advance, or suggested that might be a valuable thing. And it's interesting that in most, in a 19th century romantic novel, you wouldn't want to know the plot at all in advance, and that would detract from the experience for you. But here, clearly, you don't think it does. And so one of the questions that I have is, what is the source of the value that is distinctly Shakespeare? And I have vague expectations that it's about language, masterful use of language and ability to, but that is one of the questions that I want to discover myself over this experience, is what is uniquely Shakespeare? Why is he turned to as such one of the greats in all of history? And then how do I derive that value for myself? So Andrew, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you for being willing to do this, and also for everybody shifting the time, the day, so we can move it on Saturdays is much easier for me. Um, my experience with Shakespeare is started in high school with we read a number of Shakespeare plays in my high school. I didn't find it particularly great. It certainly wasn't as great as reading novels. And I always found it difficult, I think, because I kept going down and looking at the notes. I'd like every note, and so many words I didn't understand. And so I couldn't really have a very good reading experience with it, as well as it just being in a lot of ways over my head. Um, then I did it as a student at TAC. We read Thomas Aquinas College. We read I think 10 or 11 Shakespeare plays in the junior year. So we read his. We start out by reading some of his histories, and then we do the four great tragedies. Uh, we do a comedy. We do his last play, The Tempest, and we do a sonnet. So we did a lot of Shakespeare, and so I ended up reading it both as a student and as a tutor, and discussing it a lot, and found as I read them more and got more familiar with the stories, and I would see more in them. They were very. It got to be a deeper and deeper reading experience for me and discussion experience for me. But it really came to life for me when I started directing Shakespeare, which happened with my kids. There was a kind of local community young kids Shakespeare thing that happened, which was initiated and organized by some friends of ours. And my kids were they were younger than the kids that they were working with, but they every summer they would get a little bit further into it, and the time had just come for them to kind of have more leading roles in the next Shakespeare production. And then the family decided they weren't going to be able to do it. They just didn't have time and energy for it. So my kids were so depressed. Um, and so I said, well, I don't really know what I'm doing, but if you need somebody to direct it, I'll see what I'll try. So I picked up directing for this amateur group, and then I worked. We did I did 9 or 10 plays while I was associated with it, and I directed 6 of them, and I just loved it. I thought that's the most fascinating thing, to be able to take the words of Shakespeare and bring them to life on the stage, and then working with younger actors. We kind of worked our way up, and as my kids got into college, we were working with college level actors, and it was just an amazing teaching and learning and enjoyment experience for me. Actually, before that happened, this was important too, that at the college, when I was a relatively new tutor, my kids were very young, maybe the oldest was about 6 or something like that. They started a Shakespeare guild, so they hadn't done it before. They hadn't performed them before. They'd read them but not performed them. And the first performance, I think, was Romeo and Juliet. And I said, well, I'll take the kids there, the 3 who were, make like 6, 5, 4 or something. I'll take them, and we'll go watch. I'll probably be there about 10 minutes, because I did expect it to be a kind of heady experience thing that would be way over their heads, like it would be if they were reading it. And they were so fascinated by it. They just loved it. They loved the drama. We never had to leave it. And so that going to the performances became a regular thing for our family. And I was just deeply impressed with how much younger children, if they actually bring them to the performances, they will find them, they'll find them very compelling. There was a funny story, family related story. Hamlet, we did Hamlet, and we didn't cut much of Hamlet out, so it ended up being about 3 hours and 45 minutes. And my nephews came. They were younger than our group was at the time. They came to watch, and my sister-in-law told them, listen, if you sit up front and you're quiet and you behave yourself, towards the end of it, you're going to get to hear your cousin say the word ass. So it kept them mesmerized the whole time. But anyway, so that's my been my experience with Shakespeare, and then also reading more and more commentaries, seeing how inspiring Shakespeare has been to people like George MacDonald, who was an author who inspired Tolkien and Lewis. They glow about him and his importance. So I've been able to appreciate that more as I've gotten more into the world of Shakespeare. I'm looking forward to this, especially I don't want to push people to have, to be dishonest or anything, but I'm really interested, like, is Lisa going to enjoy this, or is this not going to work for her? And for others who are in that situation. Again, and I don't want to say a lot at the beginning, but I will say this, and it's kind of come out in my stories, is that it's funny. It's a little bit funny to call Shakespeare literature. It's drama. And and I think even more than something like the Chanticleer we read, you're going to have to bring it to life in thinking and imagining it, to give it its full body experience, because we don't have the narrator. We don't have the interior descriptions. We've just got the words, pretty much. We don't have very few details about how to act it, very few stage directions. So it's much more of I guess a reader involved activity to read Shakespeare,
because it wasn't meant to be read. We're
it wasn't
supposed
meant to be
to
read. Well, yeah, I mean, there's debate about that.
Okay.
But I think that it's pretty evident that it's meant to be performed and be readable, but its real life is in the performance. And so what you want to come to do is to make a performance in your imagination. And for me, it's natural now, because I direct. That's what a director has to do, is to a director has to take this, then imagine how it's going to play out live on stage, and then work with the actors and adjust. As you bring it to life, you change what you're expecting. You see new possibilities a lot of times. But the director is so. I think the best readers of Shakespeare are going to be the ones who can start to do it like a director would.
I don't know if you'll be inclined to do this naturally, but I just wanted to suggest that as we read it, if there's something that you're envisioning in your director's viewer's mind that you think is important, don't hesitate to interrupt and say so. That comes up in class. We always read plays aloud in class, and then if there's a great performance of it, I show the performance to them afterwards, so that they have a mastery of it and then can really deeply appreciate the performance. But there will be times that we just read The Miracle Worker, and at one point Annie Sullivan says, "I'll be so ladylike they won't know I've come." And of course, in the performance, she stands up and shouts across the train car with nuns seated next to her, looking at her sideways, "I'll be so ladylike." So it's not obvious there in the words themselves, but it's so critical to the interpretation of that scene.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about that, because there's an exciting and an annoying freedom in Shakespeare to put in things like that a lot, where the same lines will mean completely different things depending upon intonation, pausing, position, who you're facing. All of that can radically change how you'd interpret single lines. And so you need to build up a kind of whole picture of the characters, the play, the drama, and then try to make it so that those things the different options you have and the different opportunities you have, you can make something consistent and rich. So, okay, so I thought we would we're just going to start with the one scene. We can look at it closely. I mean, one of the difficulties with teaching Shakespeare is that we tend to read them in big chunks. So in Thomas Aquinas College, we just read whole plays one after another. You get 2 hours to talk about it. So you don't get to have the immersive experience, which I think is important for really appreciating and learning to read Shakespeare. So we're going to start with just the first scene. And I want us to read it. We'll read it and then talk about it. But I'm going to divide it into 5 parts. And so we'll read through each of the sections, and we'll be able to discuss each one, and then go on to the next. We're going to try just having people read characters, and so we'll need for this first one, we need 3 volunteers. I'm hoping this will work out. If not, then we'll have to shift for the next bit. So we're going to start with the Kent, Gloucester, and Edmund. So volunteers. All right, so Molly, Ray, did I get a third one? Okay, Nick, let's have Molly can be Kent, and Ray, you be Gloucester, and Nick, you can be Edgar. So just go ahead and don't worry about dramatizing it right now, but don't read it too fast. Try to read it somewhat naturally. Add drama if you think you've got a sense of it, but don't feel like you have to. Okay. Go ahead, Molly. Are you muted? Can you unmute?
Oh, Joseph, you have to give them power to unmute.
Oh, whoops, I didn't think that I did. No raise. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Good. Nick, can you unmute?
Yeah, all good.
Okay, all right, go ahead, Molly.
Okay. I thought the king had more affected the Duke of Albany than Cornwall.
It did always seem so to us, but now in the division of the kingdom, it appears not which of the dukes he values most, for equalities are so weighed that curiosity in neither can make choice of either's moiety.
Is not this your son, my lord?
His breeding, sir, hath been at my charge. I have so often blushed to acknowledge him that now I'm raised to't.
I cannot conceive you.
Sir, this young fellow's mother could, whereupon she grew round-wombed, and had indeed, sir, a son for her cradle ere she had a husband for her bed. Do you smell a fault?
I cannot wish the fault undone, the issue of it being so proper.
But I have a son, sir, by order of law, some years elder than his, who yet is no dearer in my account. Though this knave came something saucily to the world before he was sent for, yet was his mother fair. There was good sport at his making, and the whore's son must be acknowledged. Do you know this noble gentleman, Edmund?
No, my lord.
My lord of Kent, remember hereafter as my honorable friend.
My services to your lordship.
I must love you and sue to know you better.
Sir, I shall study deserving.
He hath been out 9 years, and away he shall again. The king is coming.
Okay. All right, good. That went well. Questions, comments, thoughts?
I don't know what's happening.
Edmund,
Okay. So
Edmund is an illegitimate son.
No, I thought Edmund was his son by law, but he's not happy about him being his son. That's what I understood.
No, he's a whoreson.
Yeah, and it said
He's a bastard.
I cannot conceive you. I got the pun. Sir, this young fellow's mother could.
so he
Son
read
for
that.
her cradle ere she had a husband for her bed.
So sir, this young fellow's mother could, whereupon she grew round-wombed and had indeed, sir, a son for her cradle, else she had a husband for her bed. Does that make sense?
She had the baby first before a husband. Yes?
Yeah.
And never seems to have married because he's presumably not married to her.
At least didn't marry the Gloucester. Now, it would be good to look back, I guess, at the list of characters in the play. So we can see that among all the characters, we have Earl of Gloucester. So he's nobility. And so it seems like the mother was, don't know exactly what she was, but she didn't probably end up marrying him. Probably not of the nobility.
Oh.
And then we've got in the list Earl of Gloucester, Edgar, his elder son, Edmund, his younger and illegitimate son. So that kind of confirms the way we're reading it here.
Mhm.
I always get confused when they both start with Ed.
Yeah. Okay, is that helpful, Joseph? Were there other yes, and I guess what does Kent mean when he says, I cannot wish the fault undone, the issue of it being so proper?
I think it means he looks polished and noble and like a good fellow to know. He holds himself well.
Well, and he says, I have a son, sir, by order of law, some year elder than this, who yet is no dearer in my account. So does he like Edgar, the illegitimate son? Or sorry, Edmund. See, I did it already.
Yeah.
Edmund, the illegitimate son, better than Edgar, the legitimate one?
Does that seem indicated there?
He calls him a knave.
Sorry?
Oh no, I thought knave was
Knave is the illegitimate, or sorry. He does.
But he seems to be kidding, maybe
Yeah.
a
I
little.
think he's teasing him and saying, but overall seems to be happy that, he exists and isn't sorry that this affair happened or whatever.
Well, was the embarrassment that he's illegitimate. And so I used to be ashamed to acknowledge him, but now I actually like him better than, that's what it seemed like. Now I actually like him better than the one who was here lawfully.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? So in the Gloucester's second speech, I have his breeding, sir, has been at my charge. I have so often blushed to acknowledge him that now I am braced to it. So it's been an embarrassment to him that he has an illegitimate son. He has taken charge of him. He hasn't just neglected him, but he hasn't owned up to it either. But now he's braced to it.
Kind of like he's brazenly admitting it.
And introducing him into the court.
Mm-hmm.
So this is
Maybe
his
because he
first-
turned out so well.
I was wondering, the first line, so is it that they're talking about something different and then Edmund walks in? Okay.
Yes, so let's read those first two and see if we can make sense of this. I thought the king had more affected the Duke of Albany than Cornwall. It did always seem so to us, but now in the division of the kingdom, it appears not which of the dukes he values most, for equalities are so weighed that curiosity and neither can make choice of either's moiety. I guess, first of all, that seems like something not at all connected with what has dominated this portion of the scene.
Mm-hmm.
And any other guess as to what this is about?
Those first two lines?
Those first two lines, yeah.
So he's divided his kingdom equally between two people when it seemed he had greater fondness for, it had seemed that he had greater fondness for one than the other.
Yeah, that's what I'm reading.
mhm.
Hey, Joseph?
Yeah, that's how I'm reading it too. Like he thought he liked Duke of Albany more, but now based off of how he's dividing the kingdom, it's not clear who he values more.
Okay,
It's
so then,
interesting.
I mean, it's really striking here at the beginning of the play. We get a two-speech introduction to some kind of political problem or whatnot that's going to come up. And then that just gets interrupted and we talk about about this, the illegitimate son, and how the Earl of Gloucester feels about him, and getting him introduced to Kent and to the court.
Mhm.
Is it because he wants to know who is this fellow that's listening in on our conversation about politics? Like
Okay, so
Kent, Kent is asking Gloucester, so here we are talking amongst ourselves, two older men who are discussing politics, and there's this kid listening, or a teen, and he maybe wants to know, who is this person before I say too much? So this is your son.
what do people think about that?
Seems possible.
So here's here'd be a question then, in terms of directing and imagining, acting it out. How would you have Edmund come on?
Mm.
Yeah, so how do you think that it just, all it says is enter Kent, Gloucester, and Edmund. Do you think they would come in a bunch? Would they come in separately from different sides? Would Kent and Gloucester be there and Edmund kind of tailing along behind, but not really with them?
Yeah, that's what I kind of pictured, as they were
Mhm.
strolling, talking, and Edmund's kind of behind them, listening or following along.
And then maybe in
And-
that moment, he becomes kind of self-aware about the significance of the thing that they're talking about and says, well, who's this guy with us?
Are
Or
they
it could be that they
exiting
were
a meeting?
leaving an
They-
announcement of some sort where they discovered or found out
Mm.
how these things were being distributed, and then as they're leaving, they're saying, oh, I was surprised by that, and oh, is this your son?
Mm.
Well, I'm already very intrigued.
And those are I think that those are all legitimate options, and as you work through the play and start to see more of the drama as a whole, and get to know the characters better, then then you come back and say, okay, I think I would want to do it this way.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll say, there are two or three that could work. This is what I want to do right here. More like an artist's judgment in the moment. Some of them might say, well, that actually would throw the whole rest of the play off, or it doesn't. Some of them you just say, yeah, I could see if you're just looking at this, that might work. But
Well, given your understanding of the play, can you tell us how you would do it?
how would I do it? I would probably have Kent and Gloucester come on talking together, but Edmund, and maybe Edmund come from the other side, coming up to greet
Mm.
them. So that, so it allows Gloucester to say, kind of give ownership of him, and be the one introducing him a little more. But I could see the other ways of doing it being okay too.
I would maybe have Edmund kind of waiting outside in the anteroom for his dad to be done with his meeting.
Mhm.
Because he's a young man, he's not really included in the politics yet, and so he's not going to have his own business at wherever they're at, in the palace or near the king's chambers.
It
So
definitely has
he's-
a feel of a dad bringing his son to the office.
Mm.
yeah,
Especially like if he's the owner of the business and he's bringing his son around for the first time as getting the guy who's going to take things over eventually. Yeah. Now, one thing that happens that might also affect this is just at the end of a little bit, we have a Senate, which would be a trumpet, like a trumpet sound or some sort of fanfare. The king is coming, and then the king enters with quite a train. So then you have to say, you have to ask yourself, are they surprised by this, or are they there because they expected the king to come in and do things? So that might also affect it. So in a way, it's like, are Kent and Gloucester there for this meeting, or are they coming from some other business, and we're catching them in between? Let me
I
ask.
have a question.
Go ahead. Mhm.
I am confused who Edgar is, and how you know about this person before the text that we read so far. in a second question, but could you answer that first?
Okay, so Edgar gets introduced in the drama just at line 19. But I have a son, sir, by order of law, some year elder than this, who yet is no dear in my account. The name Edgar has not been mentioned yet, but that's the one we're talking about.
Okay. And so
And then if you had looked at the cast of characters, you'd see that Edgar is his elder son, and Edmund is listed as his second and his younger and illegitimate son.
Got you.
Mhm.
And when in that same line by Gloucester, when he's introducing his son in the immediate moment, Edmund, he says at the end of that, "Do you know this noble gentleman, Edmund?" So I'm confused. Why is he like almost asking his son if he knows himself? Do you see my confusion?
No, he's addressing Edmund. He's saying, Edmund, do you know this noble gentleman?
And the noble
is
gentleman
Edmund?
is the noble gentleman is Kent.
Do you know this noble gentleman, Edmund?
Saying, Edmund, my son, do you know Kent?
Yeah, so it's a direct.
Oh,
it's not
okay.
a
I'm
positive.
sorry.
It's not a positive. It's a direct address.
Understood. Thank you.
Well, and I noticed that that's kind of something parents do when they're first trying to get their kids to speak up for themselves, is they'll coax them into, so do you know this man? Maybe you could say hello. And he's sort of paving the way for him to make his own introduction, or for him to speak for himself. But
Oh.
maybe Edmund hasn't been out in society much, and it's
Mhm.
kind of bringing him into it's the coming out debutante ball kind of thing, but for a young man.
Yeah.
So now, Edmund, it's time to introduce yourself, and
right.
you already have the look of a noble gentleman, and now it's time to hold your own. I
So
think.
then, among other questions, just from this little bit we've read, what impression do you get of Edmund then? Here, how is he coming across to you right in his first introduction?
He seems like he's hanging back a little.
Well, he's young, and then they're, describing the circumstances of his birth right in front of him.
Right. And teasing him a little.
Yeah.
And a little studied in his manners, maybe. So
Yeah, I
Yeah,
love when he
he's sort
says,
of-
"Sir, I
services
shall
to-
study deserving." That's great. What child or young person would say that? That's awesome.
But that's a fairly common way of talking, and it's a little bit cliched in Shakespeare. It's almost like he just has the expected answer,
expected
like
answer.
saying
what do you think-
charmant or
Yeah, what does it mean?
enchanté.
What does it mean, sir, I shall study deserving?
I'll work to earn your respect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that-
Well, Kent says that he wants to get to know him, and then he says, I will try to deserve you getting to know me.
Mhm.
so that's a polished way
Mhm.
of saying something that's. Do you take? Is that a good way of?
It seems
are you
very-
does it give you a favorable impression of Edmund that he says it that way?
It doesn't give me any strong impression, except that Gloucester is very loose in his language. He just said there was a good sport in his making, and Edmund, by contrast, seems very like he's saying the thing he ought to say.
Yeah, it
Almost
seems
like he's been coached.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a humility, but I can't tell if it's like feigned or earnest. Yeah.
It's too stiff. It's too
Mm.
formal.
So it's polished, and so in that way you might have a decent impression of him, but also you're not sure. Is he too much in control of himself?
Well, it could be from inexperience, it could be from nerves, it could be this is what he's trained. I mean, there are all kinds of reasons, but the thing that strikes you is it sounds rehearsed.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Also, then, if you connect it with the fact that Gloucester has to invite him to talk to Kent.
Mhm.
He is that because he's shy, awkward, or is he modest? Is he just properly, he sort of has this proper breeding that a young man isn't going to speak when his elders are talking, even when they're talking about him, unless he's spoken to or invited to.
Mm.
Okay, we should move on, but one other question. I think it's whether two questions. Let me just see. One is just what's your impression of Gloucester?
After
I didn't
Sorry.
hear that. Luke, did you say something? Oh, somebody said something.
He seems a little ridiculous.
Brazen is, I don't know.
He seems like drunk. Like I'd believe if he were drunk.
Boisterous, like a boisterous personality. That's like, those men who just tease everybody around them, and it's a little too much, but.
And he's wordy.
alone.
He has the most words in this scene. It's kind of like Polonius, just going on and on at length.
Try to live up to these notes.
Live up to the note.
That was not meant as a criticism.
I'll ham it up.
Okay. And then the other thing I want to ask is when he says, but I have a son, sir, by order of law. What do you think that means? And
I just thought it meant legitimate.
But the way I took it was, initially I took it as, yeah, I have a son by the letter of the law. But now that, gotten into it more, perhaps it's not as negative as that initial interpretation made it seem like.
I wonder if it's about the mother. If he had to marry the mother by order of law, and that's how he ended up with that son, as opposed to this other mother.
Maybe he's married to the woman, but he's not sure it's his. Like legally it's his because they're married. It is a little off-putting. Like it's a strange thing to say.
So how would it have been different if he had said, but I have a legitimate son? Does saying I have a son by order of law, does that sound different than I have a legitimate son?
It's hard to know because I don't know if the phrasing of the time is different from the way we would say it. So it's hard to know, but you do just get the feeling that he likes better the one that he ought not to, or the one he ought to be ashamed of is the one he favors. And so there's a sense of kind of obligation, and it just fits the personality, I guess, we've seen. He doesn't seem very rule bound as a character.
By order. So I have a son by order. I had the son that was saucily conceived with good sport at his making. Then I have a son by order of law. At least by putting it that way, I think even more than legitimate. Legitimate, we would just sort of gloss over, but by putting it by order of law, there's some kind of distancing almost in that expression, at least that you can suspect that.
Yeah, like the law is requiring him to recognize him, not him. He's not recognizing him necessarily.
And maybe he didn't have as much sport at his making.
Doesn't sound like it.
Well, and he doesn't seem to take any responsibility for the fact that he made this child. Like moral responsibility. It's just how annoying. I had this kid just appeared. Okay,
well, that's good for the opening a little bit. Let's go ahead and take on the next section, and that will run. It's going to run longer here and be much more dramatic. We're going to go over to page 15. So we'll need a Lear, Gloucester, the three daughters, Goneril, Cordelia, and Regan.
I'd like to be Cordelia, if that be okay.
Yeah, So who, do we have a Lear volunteer?
Come
I
on.
can read something.
Okay, we'll do Luke. Luke will be Lear. And Gloucester, somebody who, Gloucester's not going to be too important here. All right, Ray will give you Gloucester. And then we'll need the three. So we got Cordelia and we need Goneril.
I can do Goneril.
Okay. And then we'll have, you can do Regan, Lisa, is that all right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think that's everybody. So let's go. Lear, start us off.
Tend to the lords of France and Burgundy, Gloucester.
Ray, we can't hear
Ray, you
you.
have to unmute yourself.
I shall, my lord.
Meantime, we shall express our darker purpose. Give me the map there. Know that we have divided in three our kingdom, and 'tis our fast intent to shake all cares and business from our age, conferring them on younger strengths, while we, unburdened, crawl toward death. Our son of Cornwall and you, our now less loving son of Albany, we have this hour a constant will to publish our daughter's several dowers, that future strife may be prevented now. The two great princes, France and Burgundy, great rivals in our youngest daughter's love, long in our court have made their amorous sojourn, and here are to be answered. Tell me, my daughters, since now we will divest us both of rule, interest of territory, cares of state, which of you shall we say doth love us most, that we our largest bounty may extend, where nature doth with merit challenge? Goneril, our eldest born, speak first.
Sir, I love you more than word can wield the matter. Dearer than eyesight, space, and liberty, beyond what can be valued, rich or rare, no less than life, with grace, health, beauty, honor, as much as child e'er loved or father found, a love that makes breath poor and speech unable. Beyond all manner of so much I love you.
What shall Cordelia speak? Love and be silent.
Of all these bounds, even from this line to this, with shadowy forests, and with champaigns riched with plenteous rivers and wide-skirted meads, we make thee, lady. To thine and Albany's issue be this perpetual. What says our second daughter, our dearest Regan? Regan?
Regan, probably.
Regan, our dearest Regan, wife of Cornwall. Speak.
I am made of that self-metal as my sister, and prize me at her worth. In my true heart, I find she names my very deed of love, only she comes too short, that I profess myself an enemy to all other joys which the most precious square of sense possesses, and find I am alone felicitate in your dear highness's love.
Then poor Cordelia, and yet not so, since I am sure my love's more ponderous than my tongue.
To thee and thine hereditary ever remain this ample third of our fair kingdom, no less in space, validity, and pleasure than that conferred on Goneril. Now, our joy, although our last and least, to whose young love the vines of France and milk of Burgundy strive to be interested. What can you say to draw a third more opulent than your sisters? Speak, Cordelia. Oh, speak.
Nothing, my lord,
Nothing?
nothing.
nothing will come of nothing. Speak again.
Unhappy that I am, I cannot heave my heart into my mouth. I love your majesty according to my bond, no more, no less.
How, Cordelia? Mend your speech a little, lest you may mar your fortunes.
Good, my lord, you have begot me, bred me, loved me. I've returned those deep duties back as are right fit, obey you, love you, and most honor you. Why have my sisters husbands if they say they love you all? Happily, when I shall wed, that lord whose hand must take my plight shall carry half my love with him, half my care and duty. Sure, I shall never marry like my sisters, to love my father all.
Goes thy heart with this?
Aye, my good lord.
So young and so untender?
So young, my lord, and true.
Let it be so. Thy truth, then, be thy dower. For by the sacred radiance of the sun, the mysteries of Hecate and the night, by all the operation of the orbs from whom we do exist and cease to be, here I disclaim all my paternal care, propinquity and property of blood, and as a stranger to my heart and me, hold thee from this forever. The barbarous Scythian, or he that makes his generation messes to gorge his appetite, shall to my bosom be as well neighbored, pitied, and relieved as thou, my sometime daughter.
Okay,
Good, my liege.
we're gonna stop. I'm gonna stop there.
Oh,
Okay, so before getting into more substantial questions, are we clear what's going on here? Joseph, question. Yes, he's now my dumb guy. Like, did you get it, Joseph?
He's our canary in the coal mine.
I see some dots, but I definitely could use some help connecting all of them.
Okay, what do you have specific places where it's difficult?
I mean, I know he starts by talking about how he's dividing the kingdom, and then it sounds like there's daughters, and one of them might be, I think, Cordelia. There's two people that want her hand in marriage, Burgundy and what was the other one? France, I'd say.
So
And yeah,
that first line was which he likes better, Duke of Albany or Cornwall. So those are the husbands of Regan and Goneril.
I see. So we know why he, in the first part we read, why he split the land is his daughter's husbands. He's giving it to them, and he's talking about how he's trying to, it sounded like, set the youth up for ruling the kingdom, and you know, he's trying to plan for the future. And his legacy is what I gathered from part of that.
So it sounds like he went in with the expectation that he was going to divide the land evenly among the three of them, but then asked them to proclaim their love each in turn before he specifically bestows the particular plot of land with their boundaries to each one of them.
to me, it sounded like he was planning on giving Cordelia the biggest piece or the nicest third.
Yeah, he says that
Mm.
after he is upset at her. He says something to that effect, that he loved her the most when he's angry at Kent.
Loved her the most, but I'm just trying to integrate it with the line at the beginning. I thought he liked the Duke of Albany better than Cornwall, but now the division of the kingdom.
Yeah, I thought what people were saying is that the two that are split between Regan and Goneril are equal, but then when he's
Okay.
asking Cordelia what she says, he says, strive to be interest, what can you say to draw a third more opulent than your sisters?
Mm.
But that also, he might have been planning to split it 3 ways, but he's saying, oh, if you can say something sweeter than they, then I'll give you a better third.
And at
Mhm.
91, he starts out with saying, now, he addresses her, now our joy,
Mhm.
although our last and least.
Yeah.
You know, so here we also have a father who's sort of singling out in the presence of, well, he's singling out one of his kids in some ways as a favorite,
Mhm.
which is striking.
Mhm.
But
And
It's
this
one
must,
thing.
Publicly.
this must
Sorry.
have been known ahead of time, because as they go in, they're saying, I mean, in the opening, they were talking about how it was divided. But it seems that now we're seeing him divide it. So was this known, and is this just a formality?
That's the connection I was trying to understand.
It's very striking about this play that Shakespeare doesn't tell us anything about the backstory, and perhaps it is on purpose. Like, we don't know what kind of king he was, you know, what he did before, and this, that, and the other. Like, we just dive right into the middle of the action, and we would have to speculate a lot about like what might have happened earlier. So I'm not sure in what way it's a device that he's using by not. It's surely not an accident, because in other plays, like they talk about action. Shakespeare talks about, I mean, his characters talk about things that have happened, so that indirectly, at least, we know what has happened elsewhere or in the past. Here in this entire play, we never know anything about what happened prior to the onset to the scene one.
Okay, but in terms of the basic thing that happened, he goes to them, he's going to divide up his kingdom. He just wants to be left, this line struck me, to crawl to death, unburdened, crawl to death. So he's bestowing land upon each of them. He asks for declarations of love. Goneril and Regan's are completely over the top, insincere sounding, grandiose flattery. And then we have Cordelia whispering to herself on the side, if this is what they're going to say, what do I say? Well, I'll say nothing. I'll just love and be silent.
Just real quick on the question about the division, he does say on the map, he brings out the map, and he says, know that we have divided in 3 our kingdom.
Yeah.
So one way you could imagine is he's got the map and he's made the divisions there. And what Gloucester and Kent were talking about was, well, those divisions are so equal that you thought he would have given a bigger portion to one, but he doesn't have a bigger portion. They're pretty much equal.
Well, it could allow for Cordelia's to be larger than the other 2, because it's just their 2 that are equal.
Equal in size, but you know, one's got
Right.
some nicer features. But I
So
also
I'm like-
noticed that
Well,
Heather?
presumably one has the castle in it, right?
But I don't know if this is wrong, but the other thing I got from the sense of the line that Lear said to Cordelia is that, all right, now what will you say to try to get more land than your sisters? Not that I'll give it to you, but in this competition among you,
So
to flatter me the best, let's hear your turn.
it is not
Quick
more land, it's a
question.
nicer portion.
Joseph.
So on line 85, Cordelia is kind of saying that to herself, right? She's kind of, so you can read, like, she sounds sincere then. She's saying she's sure of her love. I assume she's talking about for her father. So she's saying, oh, what am I going to say? I know I love him. How, but they sound so fake. And how am I going to actually come across as sincere in this context? Is that the right? So she's, of the 3, the most sincere. She actually loves him. Now she's being, but this disclaimer of love has to come in the context of trying to get land. So how could you possibly come across as sincere when there's this, you know, carrot you're being offered?
The little note that says aside, that is telling you that she's speaking to herself. Nobody else can hear her.
I see.
I thought part of it too, she's not concerned with him. She's not as concerned that he thinks she's sincere. It's just that she doesn't want to lie. Like her sisters are just lying that they love him more than any man on earth. And she's like, well, then why are you married? Because you should love your husband more than your father at this point. So she just, it's like an integrity thing where she's like, I'm not going to play the game and I'm not going to lie about it. And if he, like, whether he thinks she's sincere or not is not really accounted to her. It's just that she's not going to lie.
But I also love the line, then poor Cordelia. Well, Regan had just said, I find I am alone felicitate in your dear highness's love. So like, I love you the most, I guess is what that means. And she says, well, then poor me, to herself again. And yet not so, since I'm sure my love's more ponderous than my tongue. I know that my love counts for more than the words that Regan or Goneril might say.
I noticed that in the beginning, Kent and Gloucester were talking about the king dividing it between the Dukes of Albany and Cornwall, so the husbands. But then in this scene, it seems like he's dividing it against his daughters. So,
well,
I mean,
they and their husbands, but Cordelia hasn't chosen her husband
right.
yet.
It just seems like point, though. It seems like the dukes in the court are kind of in a different scene almost, or looking at it differently than the little family, right? The king and the three daughters. It's a different thing for them.
Yeah, they're thinking about it sort of politically. He's trying to choose between the two guys, whereas with Lear, it's he's presenting it as I'm actually choosing among my daughters.
Right. And I want this flattery. Like he obviously wants them to be flattering to him and to say these words, and it makes him angry that Cordelia doesn't.
Well, I guess it feels a little bit to me like he's using the division of the land as an opportunity to get them to declare this love for him, and that's the goal is not actually about the division of land. It's about the declaration of love.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And if you're the king, it should be about what's good for your country, right? Yeah. I mean, it's as if he's sacrificing the political future for some personal hubris and familial relationship.
He didn't seem to relish that role too much if he wants to unburden himself and crawl to death. So it doesn't give a very noble feeling to ruling over the land.
But he definitely is aware of the danger, because the very first line, the first thing he says in the first long bit of speech is, meanwhile, we shall express our darker purpose. And I think he knows, like, yeah, when it comes to division of land at transition moments, this is when like things can go really, really horrible. And we got to get this out of the way. And we got to make sure we do this right. So he's not being callous about it. At least he couldn't be if he knows that, right?
Yeah, though, I think it is, I'm really struck this time, I hadn't thought about it very much before, that he's turning what is of deeply political significance into this contest of flattering love from his daughters, even to the point by disinheriting Cordelia.
Well, it's
exceptional. You're gonna have to wonder how it's going to affect these political marriages. So she's got a choice between the Duke of Burgundy and the King of France. So there's Lear has this new alliance that he'd be fostering with either one of these, but now he's going to blow it up because Cordelia wouldn't flatter him. That's really shocking.
Well, it does seem exceptionally self-absorbed, because the line, even before unburdened, 'tis our fast intent to shake all cares and business from our age. If you're thinking about the welfare of the kingdom, you wouldn't phrase it that way, that my goal right now is to unburden myself and get rid of all cares. Now tell me how much you love me.
Luke, what you want to, what were you saying there?
I'm curious about the cultural context here with feudal system with lords and vassals, and whether or not this is meant to be a ceremonial, but Cordelia is taking it more sincerely, that rather than a pledging of an oath that you would to a lord, and that this is more a reflection of, or it seems like maybe this is Cordelia's attitude towards all the regal pageantry of things, and dad, sisters, you know what, this seems like it's too decorative and flowery, and I just want to be, this is not sincere enough for me. So I'm curious whether or not Lear is actually fishing for love, or is this is just meant to be like, oh, a formality.
Is
And
this, so
then
is this,
she
is
messes
this,
it all up.
you know, so is it expected that the daughters would, does everybody else expect the daughters would do this, say these things and kind of approve it? Or would they also react about the daughters like we do, that they're completely flattering him and he wants it and he's eating it up? So we would just cringe at the whole thing if we were spectators in it. So let's keep that in mind as we go forward and see what the reactions are.
Can I just ask a quick question about the text? The brackets, do those mean anything? Do we need to know anything about that? Like some of the text is in square brackets or?
Yeah, so it's often a problem with Shakespeare's, we don't know actually what he wrote, or did he have a final version? So he would write things for the actors to do the performances, and then people would try to, like, they go to the play and then they like try to copy it all down while they're listening, so they could then go out and publish it. And then Shakespeare would come back and publish something a little later to combat the fact that people have published something already. And then after he died, and sometimes he might just fill it out like, I'll publish. We couldn't perform all of this. It was too many lines. So you didn't see in the performance, but here's sort of the whole thing. And then after he died, some of his colleagues put together what's known as the first folio edition, where they gathered all the plays together and published it kind of all together officially. So there are different versions that we have, that those versions often differ in minor ways and in significant ways. The Lear, there's a quarto, what they call a quarto, which had been published during Shakespeare's lifetime. And then there's a folio edition, which was published after his death. So the brackets, I think, are showing us, I think they decided to use the folio version, the editors here decided to use the folio version as the main text, and the brackets are things from the quarto that are generally included, but they want to let you know that it's not part of the folio edition. I think that's right.
Okay.
Can I ask a question from
it's
online about the text too?
Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
Just a quick question. When Lear says, for by the sacred radiance, this line like 121, for by the sacred radiance of the sun, the mysteries of Hecate and the night, by all the operation of the orbs from whom we do exist and cease to be. And he's talking about the operations of the orbs and the planets, the orbs being the planets. That's Dante. That's from Dante, is it? That understanding of what's going on there in his mind?
It's just generally the ancient medieval cosmology. So it's Ptolemy, and even the ancient Greeks had developed this idea that the planets are actually on spheres that are rotating, and that's what makes them move the way that they do. So Dante has that. It's all over Dante, but it's also more general than Dante.
Got you. Cool. Okay.
But it is also striking to me that it's very it's not Christian, right? At least right now we've got he's invoking the sun, the sacred sun, Hecate and the night, and then the operations of the orbs, the planetary orbs, from whom we do exist and cease to be. So he's attributing that all to the planetary influences. You have at least it looks like a pagan setting here.
very
Oh,
painful.
definitely,
Yeah.
you know, like he refers all through the play. He refers to the different gods, to there's reference to Jupiter, to Juno, and so on. The play is supposed to occur like in historic times, like long before Shakespeare lived. That was the idea. And Shakespeare took it from an existing play called King Lear, which was published a few years before Shakespeare wrote King Lear in 1606. So he modified that play. So certainly it refers to the pagan times without a doubt, yeah.
I want to address this. So PK had put in Shakespeare wants to keep the focus on the relationship of a father with his daughters. Though also, I think that's important, but also it leads us to reflect on Lear himself. What is Lear's character? What is he like? What is he like now? What is he like? What has he been like? Let's talk about that a few minutes before we go on. Like what's your impression of Lear right now?
This is related to it, but I wanted to go back to Luke's question or point before. So in line 55, he says, which of you shall we say doth love us most, that we our largest bounty may extend, where nature doth with merit challenge? Now, so he is saying, declare your love so we can choose who. Now, I still have the sense that he went in expecting to roughly divide it equally among them, but he's saying, now declare your love so that we can choose who gets it most. So he does seem to be really, it doesn't seem formal or like they're just going through the motions. It seems like he's hanging on their reaction, and that would explain, I don't know how this would be played on stage without reading the whole thing, but it seems to me that he gets very enraged and he's shocked and enraged by her, by Cordelia's reaction, because it's quite a powerful outburst. Truth then be thy dower. And then I disclaim all my paternal care, propinquity, and property of blood, and as a stranger to my heart, and me hold thee from this forever.
And the next line is
Some barbarian has as much claim to his love.
Well, let's read that. The barbarous Scythian, or he that makes his generation messes to gorge his appetite. Do we know what that's saying?
Oh, eats his own offspring? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So the Scythians, I think, had that reputation. So saying the person who eats his own children, that's going to be my neighbor. I will pity him because of what you've done to me.
Was he saying? Yeah, he's saying I'll love him. Shall to my bosom be as well neighbored, pitied, and relieved. So I will have as much fondness and affection for my cannibalistic neighbor as I do for my daughter.
I thought he's also saying, like, I should have done that. Like, I'll pity him because he won't have a child like you, basically, because he'll have eaten them.
Oh.
And just because she won't go over the top and flatter him. I mean, she's very dutiful and polite. She's not being disrespectful or saying, I don't love you, or rejecting him in any way, but it's just because she refuses to do this over the top flattery. That
I guess what's also tragic there is we know she actually does love him the most and the most sincerely. Yeah.
But it's almost like he wants an excuse to give her the biggest portion. Back to the quote that you read, Lisa, that it was nature versus merit, because nature would say Goneril should get it. She's the oldest. And he knows he doesn't want to give Goneril more than Regan. He wants that to be even. So he needs an excuse to give Cordelia. He needs an excuse to give Cordelia the larger portion.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have that excuse now because she's wrecked it. she's not playing along.
And I think I think one of the hardest things to imagine in a way that's satisfactory is Cordelia in this situation. What is her situation? Why does she? I mean, I guess it's I guess you could say it's clear she doesn't want to engage in this game. She thinks it would be really terrible. Now, is it pride on her part? How does she feel towards Lear? How does she feel towards her sisters? And then is she, what do we sense of her given what she actually says? I love you according to my bond, no more, no less.
Well, on that note, that doesn't sound at all lovely or lovable, because like if I had to explain to like a parent like why I love them, like I would draw to like personal memories and experiences. Like I love the way, you know, when I was 7 and you taught me how to ride my bike and we did it for like 2 hours, and
yeah,
a second, third, and fourth and fifth thing. But to her, it's like, well, according to the letter of morality, you did X, Y, and Z, and therefore I reciprocated X, Y, and Z. So therefore, what more is there to say? It's very cold and logical.
But
right?
I have sympathy for it because of the situation. Like it's really different if you're writing a letter to your parents on their birthday or something like that, and you want to express your love for them versus them dangling something in front of you and going, "Do you love me? Do you love me?" Like that. I just find that so obnoxious that I can understand her coldness, because it's like just a refusal to play that game. Because also it's so belittling to the relationship they have. Like asking her to do that isn't respectful of like the bond between parent and child either.
And maybe I think I had the same sense that that did strike me as cold, that line, I love you only according to what I'm obliged to, or however she put it. But at the same time, she needs to make it very deliberately clear that she is a foil for her sisters, that she's not engaging in the same thing that her sisters are. And so she's sort of calling out their lies and flatteries and exaggerations by saying things like, if you're the only one that they love, then they can't love their husband. So maybe it's sort of overcorrecting to make herself in contrast to her sisters.
She's sort of referring to his love too, and kind of throwing it back on him in a personal way and saying, "You've loved me. You know how much you love me. I love you that much," instead of making a display of it.
Do you think that from her asides that she's in dread and agony about about being, when it's going to come to be her turn?
Mm-hmm. Dread and agony. She seems to have resolve pretty quickly.
She has resolve. Do you also think that she's dreading the whole thing? Is this a terrible thing for her? Is this going to be a terrible trial for her when she's called out, that she's dreading, or does it not seem to affect her that way, and she's very calm and deliberate, knowing what she's going to do?
So if I were watching this and saw that scene, I can say that I would have only an enormously positive reaction to what she did. Whether that holds true over the entirety of the play, I'll leave as an open question, but I would be in awe of her in this moment because of her strength. Because of her strength, because it strikes me as she decides what the moral thing is to do, and hard or not seems irrelevant. She decides quickly, this is the right thing to do, and I'm going to do it. And then she does it.
Yeah. But then I guess what I'm wondering about is what she says.
Mm-hmm.
She knows that she knows what she can't do. She
Mm-hmm.
knows what she has to do. But does she know what to say?
Mm.
And where do the words that she says actually come from? Has she thought that out very well? Or is this something of an emotional outburst on her part? Frustration about being caught in this terrible situation? Heather?
Well, yeah, no, just that she tries not to say anything. And then she says, I cannot heave my heart into my mouth. And then she comes out with what she said about I love you as much as is proper.
So it's more about what she won't do than what she can do in that situation. I won't do what they're doing. And then it's true. He presses her into saying anything at all. Her first answer, at least according to the bracketed version, is nothing.
Nothing,
Yes.
yeah.
Because also you might think that because she says I love you according to my duty or whatever, but you might think that if a parent is asking a child for an expression of affection, that might be part of your duty as a child, to show that, to explain your love for your parent when they ask you to. But in this situation, it seems at least somewhat clear that it's inappropriate for him to be doing that in the way he's doing, at least. But she might be caught between, like, I do have a duty to my father and to do what he asks of me, but what he's asking of me right now is not appropriate. And so her, like, how to respond to that isn't clear.
So what I'm wondering is, I think when you read it at first on the page, what she says, I love you according to my bond, no more, no less. And the other thing she says seem cold, maybe calculated, but it'd be very different if she doesn't know what to say, and it kind of bursts out of her. And so she doesn't know how to express it. She's doing her best. So it could be a very passionate expression. Even though what she ends up saying is cold, it's kind of coming out of this desperation of this terrible situation she's in, especially for somebody who's young and doesn't know how to feel like she doesn't have that glib way with words.
She says,
it's interesting. So there's a side note that if this really is the passionate outburst and it's something that she has to come out on the spot, if, like, to the question then, like, where is this coming from? If it's not really from her, like, it's just something that's coming out in the moment and you got to get it from somewhere, then this is definitely the prevailing view of what, like, daughter father love is supposed to look like. Like, this is what you're supposed to say, and everyone kind of, like, knows the stock answer and anyone can access it. And she's accessing it at this point. And maybe what would she say if she had more time to think about it and more time to prepare? Like, what would her more, like, her own natural answer be to, do you love me?
If it were, for instance, Lear if it's just her and Lear alone, and he wanted to say, he asked that, how would she handle it differently then?
I think she would have said what Goneril said in that case, because that's the truth. That's how she really feels, but it's not really how the sisters feel.
Well, she doesn't love him to the exclusion of everybody else, and then take pride in being the one who deserves his love the most. So I don't think she'd say it the same way.
Especially when she's being courted by two guys right now. She's trying to decide which of these guys she's going to marry.
Well, the thing I'm now envisioning it as that's true. I'm now envisioning it as her having this strength of moral character, but still being a girl, being a young woman, and put in a very difficult situation, which I think would just endear me to the character even more, to have her have this quick resolution that she's not going to morally she's not going to do the immoral thing for personal gain, like her sisters so quickly did, but that at the same time, she's just being so earnest that she doesn't know the right thing to say.
Okay, we should stop here and move on to the next segment. But
Can I just say one quick thing?
I want to hear what Molly says.
She has the same dilemma her father is going through. It's the political versus the family. If she's choosing between people to be married to, she has to choose, is this a political decision or is this the man I love, or both? And Lear is also mixing up the political and the family.
And that's a real thing too. That's weighing on, might be weighing on her, because when she says that, well, what am I supposed to say to my husband?
Mhm.
So she really wants to to love her husband, right? And maybe Goneril, do you love your husband, or did you just marry him because that's a political thing?
Right.
But also, in not going along with what Lear is asking her, she's being disinherited, which may make her less desirable.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna go on now. We're gonna go on. We're gonna go on. All right. So Ray, you got cheated last time. So you want Kent?
Right.
What was the question? I didn't quite hear.
We're starting page 15. Do you want to do Kent?
Good.
You good to do that, or you good not to do it?
I'm fine. I'm done with the reading.
Okay.
I want to be Kent.
Okay,
It's
you
just
can be
getting
Kent.
good.
I'm going to be Lear,
Okay.
and I think that's all. We're going to go over to page 19. So,
Okay.
all right, Molly, go
Good,
ahead.
my liege.
Peace, Kent. Come not between the dragon and his wrath. I loved her most and thought to set my rest on her kind nursery. Hence and avoid my sight. So be my grave, my peace, as here I give her father's heart from her. Call France. Who stirs? Call Burgundy. Cornwall and Albany, with my 2 daughters' dowers, digest the third. Let pride, which she calls plainness, marry her. I do invest you jointly with my power, preeminence, and all the large effects that troop with majesty. Ourself by monthly course, with reservation of 100 nights, by you to be sustained, shall our abode make with you by turn. Only we shall retain the name and all the addition to a king. The sway, revenue, execution of the rest, beloved sons, be yours, which to confirm this coronet part between you.
Can I ask you to slow it down a little bit?
Okay, yes.
Okay.
I was getting excited. I will do that.
It is exciting, but I have a hard time taking in the words.
Okay.
Royal Lear, whom I have ever honored as my king, loved as my father, as my master followed, as my great patron, thought on in my prayers.
The bow is bent. Make from the shaft.
Let it fall rather, though the fork invade the region of my heart. Be Kent unmannerly when Lear is mad. What wouldst thou do, old man? Think'st thou that duty shall have dread to speak, when power to flattery bows? To plainness honor's bound when majesty falls to folly. Reverse thy state, and in thy best consideration check this hideous rashness. Answer my life, my judgment. Thy youngest daughter does not love thee least, nor are those empty-hearted whose low sounds reverb no hollowness.
Kent, on thy life, no more.
My life I never held but as a pawn to wage against thine enemies, ne'er fear to lose it, thy safety being the motive.
Out of my sight.
See better, Lear, and let me still remain the true blank of thine eye.
Now by Apollo.
Now by Apollo, king, thou swearst thy gods in vain.
O vassal, miscreant. Dear sir, forbear. There we go.
Kill thy physician and the fee bestow upon the foul disease. Revoke thy gift, or whilst I can vent clamor from my throat, I'll tell thee thou dost evil.
Hear me, recreant. On thine allegiance, hear me. That thou hast sought to make us break our vows, which we durst never yet, and with strained pride to come betwixt our sentence and our power, which nor our nature nor our place can bear, our potency made good. Take thy reward. 5 days we do allot thee for provision to shield thee from disasters of the world, and on the 6th to turn thy hated back upon our kingdom. If on the 10th day following thy banished trunk be found in our dominions, the moment is thy death. Away! By Jupiter, this shall not be revoked.
Fare thee well, king, sith thus thou wilt appear. Freedom lives hence, and banishment is here. The gods to their dear shelter take thee, maid, that justly think'st and hast most rightly said. And your large speeches may your deeds approve, that good effects may spring from words of love. Thus Kent, O princes, bids you all adieu. He'll shape his old course in a country new.
Okay. All right, what do we think of that?
Love that, Kent. This isn't the most important thing, but what struck me at the end, I could even hear it in Molly's tone when he turned to Earl and Regan. You're expecting him to say something cruel and to kind of tear them apart. And then what he says, and your large speeches may your deeds approve. So I hope you do as kindly for him as you're promising you will, that good effects may spring from words of love. So I hope you're, rather than the words being the effect of your love, that your words will have love as an effect. But anyway, it just shows the rest of us want to tear Goneril and Regan apart, but his exclusive focus is on the welfare of the king. And so he's even being generous with them in the name of trying to protect Lear and make it possible that things will turn out well for him.
Can we summarize a little bit just to make sure at least I understood?
Well, yeah, so the first speech, Andrew, that you read, maybe you can help us with that one, because that was the one that I was having a hard time taking in. So on page 15.
Okay. So
I think in the context, he's upset with his daughter, with Cordelia. Kent is interjecting to try and calm him down, and he just wants to rage, and he starts saying he's going to, leave her off the will now. We're going to divide the land between Cornwall and Albany. They're going to get everything, and he's just angry. And Kent's trying to be the voice of reason. Am I following so far?
And he's assuming no one's going to marry her now, and she can marry her own pride instead.
Yeah, and he's essentially disowning her and, cutting her out. And am I correct that Kent is trying to calm him down? And
yeah, and all Kent gets 3 words out, and gets erupted on.
yeah, right.
That's kind of
so that I was interested about that. What does he say? I'm just going back here. He says, "Good, my liege." Is there some meaning there that?
He's just saying, hey, hold on. That's it.
But also, liege would be my liege lord. I'm the person I'm bound to. This is a feudal society, so they have these.
So it's respectful. He's like, yeah. He's like, hold on a second, my lord.
But
there's some great lines.
So how does he know immediately that it seems to suggest something about Lear, that he knows just from good, my liege, exactly what Kent is going to say. He knows that Kent is going to tell him what he's doing is wrong before he said anything.
Well,
right, does that mean he knows himself that he's wrong?
That's what makes him so much worse, because he does kind of come across as just crazy, but he knows exactly what he's doing. It's not just an eruption of rage where it's like, fine, then you don't get a dowry. It's like, you don't get a dowry, you're gonna have no one to marry you. He sees the consequence of what he's doing, and he's still doubling down on it.
Are Cordelia and Kent surprised that he reacts this way? Because Cordelia says that she thinks that her love has more weight than her words, and that turns out not to be true. And Kent is speaking up and seems to have a lot of respect for Lear. So is this a new pattern of behavior for Lear, or is this?
I think it partly depends on how we read Cordelia's earlier lines, because if we saw her as really, like Andrew said, like agonizing over it, then that seems to be that she knows that there will be some bad that's going to come of it. Whereas if you knew that your father would understand that you're just not going to play his games, then you wouldn't be so worried about not doing it. So I think, but it
really ramp up our feelings for Cordelia before she speaks, if she anticipated this rage and in response, not just that she would get him, not just she make him angry, but that he would erupt on her. that if she kind of anticipated that was going to come, that would really increase the sense of distress that she's under,
Right.
knowing anticipating her turn.
So
Well,
the feeling I have is that it's eccentricities of age and this stage of his life because of all the lines about relieving himself of burden. And it just seems like a big turn away from everything his life has been before.
mhm.
So I would expect that he's behaving differently than they've come to think up to this point.
But not completely,
Not completely. Yeah.
not differently in this moment than in the one before, but differently this month or this year than before that.
I don't know if anybody's had that happen with their close older relatives, to see them as they start to they lose a little bit of they lose some of the control they had when they were when you were dependent upon them, and then things that had been little character flaws start to crack and become bigger because they no longer have as much control over themselves as they did.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a real possibility with Lear, that we're dealing with somebody who had some of these, it may be some issues before, but now he's no longer able to control them and doesn't even see that he needs to, with senility coming on. If that's the way to read him,
Which
makes it super hard.
It's interesting what Lisa was saying earlier too about it seems wrong that he's giving up his kingdom and just wants to go crawl to death or something, but you might also look at him and say, yeah, this is coming a little too late. Like he should have done this earlier when he had his wits about him more, and he held on to it too long, and now he's not even fit to dispose of his
That would make sense, make a little bit more sense of his seemingly really bad judgment and mixing up the personal and the political here, and making so much such an important political decision rest upon this craving of affirmation of love on from his daughters.
Mm-hmm.
But if he's waiting for Cordelia to marry and to come of age to be able to be the head of the kingdom, it would make sense that he would put it off so that she's able to take that biggest third. And so the timing was bad, but he was maybe waiting till she was old enough to merit a third of the kingdom. But if she's too young, he has to give it to the older daughters who he doesn't seem to trust as much.
But even
or love as much.
That's another example of messing up the personal with the political, right? Because
right.
It's not right to hold on to your rule until you're too crazy to dispose of your kingdom, even if it's true that your youngest daughter won't get the portion you want her to.
Mm-hmm.
I just
want to go ahead.
Oh, can we talk about Kent for a minute? And also, so I do find this question interesting of whether Kent is surprised, because he does, in the words at least, he doesn't, there's not a lot of acknowledgement of surprise. It's more just level-headedness and patience and trying to manage the situation. But I just read this line, which I sort of missed as we were reading it. So Lear says the bow is bent and drawn, make from the shaft. So the arrow, I assume, is pointed at Cordelia.
No.
No.
I see. Maybe it is. Okay.
Because then he says, "Let it fall, rather, though the fork invade the region of my heart."
Yeah. How do you take the bow as bent and drawn? That's.
I took it as get on with it, Kent. You're getting too flowery. You've got the bow pulled, but you're not getting to the point.
Yeah, that's what I used to think until this morning. I read and looked at the line the note on this 160. Yeah. By the way, I mean, you do want to use the notes, but you don't want to. You don't want to feel like you have to read them all.
No.
Only in a place where you're kind of stuck. But this says, "Get out of the way of the arrow."
Yeah.
Okay. So then the bow is go. What?
So he's saying, "Let me go. Don't try to interfere with what I'm doing." And he says,
the bow is bent and drawn is Lear is ready to shoot somebody.
Yeah.
I'm poised for this action.
Okay. then that
It's
makes
the same as isn't it the same as the dragon and his wrath? Do not come between the dragon and his wrath. Is he's really saying the same thing? Beautiful lines, though. Beautiful lines in how he says it.
Yeah, but he also, Kent will take an arrow to the heart rather than let him do something that will be harmful for him. And there's so many expressions of, and then later he says, on thy life no more, my life I never held but as a pawn to wage against thine enemies, nor fear to lose it, thy safety being motive. So I'm not afraid to die for you, to save you. That's what I've dedicated my life to. So yeah, I loved the line in Charles and Mary Lamb's summary where it said, oh gosh, can I find the phrase quickly? He manfully opposed Lear to do Lear good. That's a great description.
Also notice that
the line from Kent that I loved. The line from Kent that I thought was like the most beautiful in this section is easy to pass by it. Is he says the youngest daughter does not love thee least, nor are those empty-hearted whose low sounds reverb no hollowness. It requires some pause to see the imagery there. Empty-hearted, low sounds, and the hollowness.
So how do you understand that? What is the image there?
Well, so the low sounds, I mean, that Cordelia is not like professing her love very loudly, right? So he says that, but that low sound is because she's not hollow. You know, a hollow thing would probably make a louder sound, right? And so she's not empty-hearted. So it's kind of like it's a metaphor, right? Like between an instrument that is hollow and her heart not being hollow. Am I misunderstanding it?
Yeah, right. So low sounds would be quiet. It's quieter because it's so full rather than being empty. Also, I thought that that connects with him saying at line 165 that duty. Do you think that duty shall have dread to speak when power to flattery bows? At least it looks like Kent is saying they were just flattering you. That's so that on the question of is this sort of ceremonial and expected? At least Kent here is saying they're just flattering, and you're bowing to the flattery. Your power is so. He's then both Cordelia and I have the duty to speak.
To
And
speak
I think
plainly.
Sorry.
To speak plainly.
To speak plainly, which is what, and then Lear had said that about Cordelia. She can have her pride is plain. She calls it plainness. It's really pride. And then Kent is defending Cordelia here. Another thing about Kent that's striking to me in his speech here is the way he addresses Lear. So he starts out with good my liege, and then at 156, Royal Lear. But then at 163, what wouldst thou do, old man? And then as we get down to 180, see better, Lear.
And he says, be Kent unmannerly when Lear is mad. So the more he responds to him with just complete unreasonableness, the more he speaks plainly again to him. And yeah.
And he actually interrupts him.
That kind of goes along with what we were
Repeats.
saying about Cordelia too, that the form of her response is a little bit in response to the insanity of his presentation, that she might not, ordinarily she wouldn't be so blunt about it or simplify the expression of her love so much, but she has to counter what's happening there.
And again, the question came up as to whether is Kent, I don't know, maybe not surprised about Lear's bad judgment here. He's also somebody who's been extremely close to him for a long time. And has he seen his personality start to come apart, so that he's kind of on edge, but it's not it's not unexpected that this is going to happen. This sort of thing will happen with Lear now.
But he's been coming apart, but disowning his favorite daughter is, he's gone over the precipice now. So the reaction, that would make sense of why he doesn't react with shock at the beginning, but he does quickly escalate the language that he's using against Lear to try to call him back to any kind of sanity.
Mm-hmm. Let me bring up one more thing, and then we just have to decide whether we want to go for the rest of it or not, which is Lear at line 145. He says, he's talking to Cornwall and Albany. He says, I do invest you jointly with my power, preeminence, all the large effects that troop with majesty. Ourself by monthly course with reservation of an 100 nights shall be by you to be sustained, shall our abode make with you by due turn. So he's giving them all this, everything over in terms of real power and authority. But he says, I'm going to have me and 100 knights. I'm going to be at your place 1 month and then at the other place the next month, back and forth.
And he still wants the title and everything. So he's giving them the responsibility, but he still wants the, the flattery and the, yeah.
And he's going to have no burdens, and he's going to have 100 knights. And so what are they going
for them to take care of?
Yeah. I have a question.
That may be why Kent says, and your large speeches may your deeds approve, because Lear is depending on the goodness of his daughters. I mean, he's really turning his life over to them.
Nick?
Sorry, Nick, will you say something?
Just on line like 192, when he's talking to Kent toward the end of what we read, he says that thou hast sought to make us break our vows, which we durst never yet, and with strained pride to come betwixt our sentence and our power, which nor our nature nor our place can bear. Our potency made good, take thy reward. So when he says, which nor our nature nor our place can bear, when it comes to the sentence and his power, and like what he is ruling, what he's saying has to be done in the sheer nature of his power, why he can do it. Is he kind of like saying like I don't really know what to make of that line. Like, is he saying, yeah, I'm doing this, but in a certain sense, like even I can't bear to change it, or like I can't like change the way it has to be done? Like, what do you make of that line, which nor our nature nor our place can bear?
Nick, can I offer like how I interpreted it and see if it makes sense to you guys? I thought that the place refers to the fact that he's the king. So like, I'm the king. If I say so, that's what should happen. And I thought nature meant his personality. Like, I'm not the type of person who's going, once I say so, it should. I don't know if that makes sense to others.
That's how I saw it.
And when it says nor our place, like that being his station as king? Yeah. Okay.
So by my personality and by my station, I can't bear to have anyone come between my power and my decision, what I have ordered be done.
Gotcha.
Raj, what can you express more what you put in the chat? Can he?
Well, while we wait for Raj, one thing. Yeah, go ahead.
No, Raj, were you able to do it? It looks like he's unmuted. No. Okay, go ahead, Lisa.
I'm trying to be aware when I can of the phrases that have become just ever present in the English language, like mend your speech a little, lest you may mar your fortunes. I mean, that's something we say under all, mend your speech or mar your fortunes. But also just, and I did expect that the poetry of the plays would be one of the things that I come away with most, that you really have to sit with it the way we are to really appreciate that, just like you have to with poetry. But like the line, kill thy physician and thy fee bestow upon the foul disease. That's what Lear is doing by refusing the good judgment and advice of Kent, is killing his physician and paying his disease instead.
Is that
You know,
kind of
Lisa, you said, sorry, I was saying that, Lisa, you said that, a lot of Shakespeare's lines have become part of language, our idiom that we use. So there's, if I could share a Shakespeare joke. So the guy says, oh, I read Hamlet, Othello, but it's all full of cliches.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're pretty well over time. Do you want to finish reading the scene and not discuss it, or just want to put it off till next time?
I think we should pause here.
So wait, question, when for the future sessions, will we be doing what we've been doing? No, okay.
I don't think so. No, I thought what we would do is finish Act 1 for next time. Though, if we'd like to, yeah, let's just plan on finishing Act 1.
Nick, if you
Together,
want to
or-
read with me, just call me.
I think I would love that.
That's a good thing to do, is to, if groups of you want to read it out loud to one another, that's the great way to do it.
Yeah.
So to clarify, for next week, read Act 1 on our own.
Yeah.
Gotta say, this is better than Game of Thrones so far.
Yeah, and the next, I kind of want to, maybe we'll read out loud. We'll see. Maybe we'll read out loud the last part of this scene at the beginning of our next session, because it's really neat.
Well, I think it would be great to choose a few key scenes to read out loud, because I did get a lot of value out of going through it at that pace, but I do think it would take us quite a long time if we took this pace for the whole thing. So
Can I offer a suggestion for your consideration? If there's a particular scene that people love or whatever, what about the possibility of playing one of the wonderful recordings that we have access to of the plays? Because some of the performances, I saw 2 of them. In one of the, Anthony Hopkins did Lear, which is just phenomenal. So I just thought that one could easily play it on the screen and watch a scene for a little bit. Of course, it will take some time.
I'm going to recommend against that right now, because as I said in the beginning, there's so many possibilities for how you can imagine and play this. When you see one, and especially if they're very good, it might just color the way you read everything. I think it's better for us to read it first, even though there are going to be things we can't picture as well, and there's going to be a lot of options. But then you know the text well, and then you'll be able to enter into performances better, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.